Good evening, and welcome to a virtual presentation of the James Brown African American Room of the Newark Public Library in Newark, New Jersey. Tonight, we are pleased to welcome an extraordinary panel who will discuss restorative justice. This panel includes those who seek to bring the truth and new ideas about the system here in New Jersey. My name is Dale Colston, and I'm a librarian at the James Brown African American Room at the Newark Public Library. On behalf of our director, Jocelyn Bowling Dixon, and Board of Trustees President, Dr. Lauren Wells, we thank you all for joining us this evening. I would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Lenni Lenape First Nations on which we are learning, laboring, and organizing today. We also recognize the devastation and continued legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, which contributed to present-day systemic racism and oppression. Our space at the library, the James Brown African American Room, was named in honor of the late James Library Brown, a librarian, poet, activist, and influencer who was instrumental in making sure that the library seek and maintain books and resources and present programs examining and celebrating the African American experience. Mr. Brown was especially committed to urging Newark youth to pursue education and to understand the importance of the library's role in their academic growth. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague and the producer of this evening's program, Reggie Blanding. Reggie.
All right, peace. Thank you, as always, Dale. And thank you to everybody joining us tonight. Our panelists, very much appreciate y'all taking y'all time for what's absolutely an important discussion. So, I just want to say tonight, we're pleased to welcome several amazing people on the front lines in the fight for restorative, reformative justice. I hope we can, outside of celebrating the work they're doing and, show our appreciation for the work they're doing, also enlighten and acknowledge why this work is necessary. So I guess, while I would gladly read each and everyone's bio, I'm here to hear y'all tonight and, interject and learn from y'all. So, if we could just start with, each of you just introducing yourselves and as much as you care to divulge about what led you to your current path and these programs or these current programs. So whoever might want to start or.
Yeah, I'm Ian Jabrell. I am the current acting regional manager for the Petey Greene in New Jersey. I've been with Petey Greene almost 4 years. Petey Greene primarily focuses on recruiting and training primarily college students to go inside of correctional facilities and work with incarcerated learners one-on-one with some GED level tutoring and also some college level tutoring as well. I got into this line of work because I myself was able to benefit from prison education while incarcerated, but then also I benefited from re-entry education. Once I was released, I applied and enrolled at Rutgers University in New Brunswick, to which I eventually graduated. Since then, I've been primarily focused on engaging with at-risk youth and engaging in those that came through the same pathway that I came and hopefully provide them similar opportunities that I was provided.
Peace. Thank you, brother Ian. And sure, next up.
Peace, everyone. My name is Chris Chartiers. My brothers and sisters know me as Talib, which means student. I myself am a volunteer coordinator for the Petey Greene program in New Jersey, a Mellon Fellow with NJ Step Mountain View community, a proud alum of that. I myself also am a system impacted person. I have served essentially 24 of my 42 years of life in a confined space, beginning at the age of 15 years old at the New Jersey well, essentially Jamesburg. They call it the New Jersey Training School for Boys, but it's anything but training. And the trajectory that essentially led me to where I'm at now is exactly that, how to transcend beyond confined spaces. And we find, in the words of Frederick Douglass, it essentially comes from education. It began with me autodidactically, and then I was presented with the opportunity to join the NJ STEP community while it was inside. It was then a private program. And we get to reentry education, where I ended up getting my degree from Rutgers University, Newark. And I'm proud to be sitting here today to be able to assist in communicating what restorative justice actually looks like.
Thank you. Appreciate having you here. And let me see, whoever might want to, between Tia, Christina.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tia Ryans, and I am also an NJ STEP alum. I am the founder of Forcing Out Recidivism Through Education, which stands for Forcing Out Recidivism. Fort House. For Forcing Out Recidivism Through Education is, we call it Fort House. We don't actually say the whole entire word. So let me mute my phone. And we provide access to transitional housing for formerly incarcerated students that are pursuing their post-secondary careers. And I am also the founder of All of Us or None, Northern New Jersey, where we are a grassroots organization that fights for the restoration of human and civil rights for those that are currently formerly incarcerated, as well as their family members. And super excited that also the founder of All of Us Publishing. And we have our first book coming out that is a collective memoir of not only personal experiences of people that are formerly incarcerated, but also gives actual resources, right? Resources that we fact check, that we check addresses, we check phone numbers to make sure they're still in existence. But we also know that the best resources come from those who have experienced it. So they're at the center of this book. Yeah, and I'm just super excited to be here, super excited to delve deeper into this very important topic.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. And absolutely looking forward to seeing that book as well. So thank you. And hey.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Christina Walling. Thank you so much for having me. I'm with NJ STEP also. I'm the Director of Academic Affairs with NJ STEP. And I came to Newark in 2013 and joined NJ STEP in, I would say 2015, 16. And I've been there ever since. And primarily I began with teaching inside. And so now I have this dual role where I teach inside still, but I also do some administrative work as well. So I'm sort of in both spaces and a little bit on campus also. So a little bit of everything, really. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. My name is Shanti Jones. I'm from the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, where I manage our 150 Years is Enough campaign, which is our campaign to close New Jersey's youth prisons. I am a social worker by education. However, I do not do clinical work. I am a policy and planning social worker, which means that I essentially love to empower and lift up community members in order to pursue change, just kind of, turn things on its head, right? There are a lot of, characteristics that people have that unfortunately place them in marginalized spaces. And as a person who grew up with adverse childhood experiences, extremely poor, out of home placement, all of that, without the investment that I was able to have by luckily being placed in a home, where I was afforded opportunities, I would have been incarcerated. There's no doubt about that. And so it's really important for me in this role to pursue avenues to make that a reality for every child, that with the proper resources, with the proper investment, and if we just kind of shift how we prioritize our spending in the state and prioritize what we deem to be important for our young people, we can essentially eliminate, youth incarceration from our model of engaging young people. And so that's my personal kind of, center. And so I am glad to be able to do this work, at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, really making this a reality.
Thank you. And, again, as with everyone, I'll probably hear me say it several times. I can't thank y'all enough for the work that y'all are doing. And, any way we could advocate and support, we're absolutely here to do so. And just a, message for anyone on Facebook and in the chat here. Not sure if we'll try our best to get to questions. I think we're going to have a lot to discuss. But any comments, questions you can leave in the chat or in the comments on Facebook, and I'll do my best to take a look and see what we might be able to share. But I guess where I do want to start with Sister Shanti. I think you've given us some background on the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice, the work you're doing there. Could you tell us about this current bill? There's the Transformative Justice Bill, which was signed into law last year. So could you just bring, I guess either enlighten people who don't know about this bill or bring us up to speed on where, what it is and where we currently are with it?
Sure. So I'll just share my screen really quickly, just to give some folks some visuals, just in case that's helpful. Just to ground us a little bit and kind of like how we got to getting this bill passed and what it will actually do for young people in New Jersey. So essentially, background on the Institute, we are a policy and advocacy organization, right? And so basically we seek to provide social justice advocacy and change by allowing community members to really drive our work, right? That's our theory of change, right? Engaging community members, impacted people, in order to figure out exactly how are these issues showing up on your doorstep and how can we engage the people who are elected to represent us in actually implementing these things, right? And so we work across 3 pillars primarily, which is our economic justice pillar, our democracy and justice pillar, and our criminal justice pillar. The criminal justice pillar is where I work in, and also where this restorative justice legislation, came out of. And so restorative justice from the Institute's perspective began as a community-led effort, right? We understood that youth incarceration has been happening in this state for over 150 years. The recidivism rates are upwards of 70%, right? Young people are not receiving any type of services within the institutions that are actually priming them for successful reentry, and the reentry services are subpar. And so what that means is that you're essentially recycling young people until they end up in the DOC. Also, along with those statistics, there's 18 to 1, right? 18 Black kids are 18 times more likely to be incarcerated in the state than white kids, which is the highest racial disparity rate for young people in the country. Okay, and so when you recognize that you're having issues like this, right, and you're spending, $600,000 to incarcerate one of those kids annually, this system is absurd, right? It's antiquated, it's old, and it isn't working. And so what we did was we come together with community members across the state, across 6 cities where young people are primarily coming from and being incarcerated, and said, what do you guys have in your communities, right? What resources are here? What is the school system like? What is the, what kind of ecosystem exists in your community for your young people to tap into, for your families to have resources for, right? And then what don't you have, right? Asset mapping, figuring out what's there and what's missing. And one of the largest themes that came out of that was restorative and transformative justice. And we've heard these words, like they're like buzzwords when you think about places like New York and California, because they've been doing this for a while and have been pretty successful at it. But in a place like New Jersey, it's not something that we actively considered, like not in a meaningful way, especially not with the investment that would be necessary to make it possible. And so we came together and people said, we want restorative justice to underpin our youth justice approach. And so what we did was literally sat with all those people and said, okay, well, what does that look like, right? We know New York has a model, we know Oakland has a model, we know that, Baltimore has a model, but what does this model look like for New Jersey? And so what actually came out of that was a toolkit called a Youth Justice Toolkit, a community-led restorative justice approach, which essentially outlined all of these concepts here, right? Restorative justice, what it is, it's a theory of justice right? It focuses on community relationships, repairing harm caused by a person, and really helping people understand kind of the underpinning and kind of triggering factors that led a child to commit a crime. Kids don't commit crimes because it's fun, right? There's usually something there, something that happens. And so it allows us to repair these relationships in the community, taking responsibility for each other, and actually allowing, not saying that, there's no accountability taking place, because there definitely is accountability taking place, but that accountability doesn't have to mean incarceration. That accountability may look like this young person stealing from a store, and the store owner now understands that that kid was just hungry. And so we're not going to call the cops on that kid, but that kid will probably come on, after school and come sweep up for a couple of dollars, right? Or they may come and, take out the garbage for us on the weekends, something like that, that repairs that relationship, repairs that harm, right? Allows the business owner to understand the child and where the child came from, but also allowing the child to understand the impact of their actions, because that local store is owned by a family who lives here, right? And so it's all about community engagement. It's all about peace circles. It's all about safe spaces. It's all about dialogue, mending relationships, and taking responsibility and accountability for our own actions and for one another. And so what this toolkit did was it laid out exactly how to do that in New Jersey, right? Exactly where do you find people? How do you engage with law enforcement? How do you get money for this, right? We gave grant examples, right? We gave all the little pieces, right? Community accountability councils. How do you build those? What are they, right? And what should the structure of restorative justice, peace circles, and dialoguing look like? And that eventually was turned into the Restorative and Transformative Justice for Youth and Communities Pilot Program bill. It literally lifted that language and placed it in bill language, right, in bill form, and allowed us to move away from incarceration 20% of the JJC budget, which is a huge win, right? $8.4 million for restorative and transformative programming. And so transformative justice is in line with restorative justice, but this centers on more so of changing the ecosystem. How do we allow institutions to work together, right? How do we integrate trauma-informed care? How do we integrate healing in the institutions that our young people partake in, right? It's about community accountability, not necessarily person to person, right? But like, how do we encourage our banks, right, to give more funding to the communities that they serve, right? How do we allow community stakeholders to be accountable for what they said they're going to do? How do we address violence meaningfully by engaging all of our community members and pillars? And so restorative and transformative justice, in that sense, really looks to transform our communities in a meaningful way that builds around our young people, not pushes them out. And so the bill basically, and this is a photo that you guys can see, just pulls together all of these institutions, right? So instead of suspending a child from school, you'll most likely refer them to the Restorative and Transformative Justice Hub. They'll still get the education, but they'll have to participate in these programs so that we can get to the root of what's causing the issue, right? And pad that kid with the resources that they need to curb the behavior before they have to enter the justice system. And so that bill was passed in 2021. And what it does is gives 4 cities, Newark, Camden, Trenton, and Patterson, equal share of that $8.4 million to provide a 2-year pilot program on restorative justice. It'll follow clearly the bill and all the programs and all the relationships they're supposed to build, but each city is different. And so, which is why the cities themselves will apply for the funds with their model. How will they implement restorative justice? And so we've been able to see excellent progress across, different states. Like in Chicago, they were actually able to curb hundreds of potentially critical incidents where young people would have been incarcerated. In Oakland, California, they've reduced their school suspensions by 87%, and we're all well aware of the school to prison pipeline, right? And so if we implement something like this in New Jersey, what this does is for those 4 cities where the majority of our young people are being incarcerated or coming from, where they live, and we pad them up with the resources and the front end investment that they need, we'll see a drastic decline in our reliance on punitive measures. And so we're in the process right now where the communities are coming together to understand how to apply for the funding, right? And then we'll soon, over the summer, be talking about how to build up your accountability boards. And then funding should start to be released at the top of 2023. And so I'll stop sharing here and we can hop into our conversation.
Thank you so much for even just breaking that down and, all those moving parts. And, I think at the end, I'm saving it for the final question, but maybe, how anybody watching can contribute and, assist with these organizations doing this work. So my sense is of this sort of like broad based approach to, the incarceral system, which, of course, hit it from every angle, however we can approach it and, fix it or, go at it. I think so. There's the education aspect to it as well, which I think of with PD Green. So I wanted to just jump to Ian and Chris just to ask about, sort of the work or how, how the work that PD Green is doing might be integral with the NJISJ for either one of you, whoever might want to take that.
Yeah. So, pre-pandemic, we were primarily focused on giving support to incarcerated students. Now, I'm housed in New Jersey, but we're in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, New York, Rhode Island, Boston, and DC. So we pretty much are, the founders of the program found a niche and a need for educational support inside of correctional facilities. And we've been focused on that for about 11 years up until the pandemic. And once the pandemic occurred, of course, everything was shut down. We had to figure out a way to maintain programming. So we introduced reentry support that we're primarily starting with NJ STEP students that are currently Mountain View community students that they're matriculating now throughout the state of New Jersey, Rutgers Newark, Rutgers New Brunswick, Rutgers Camden, and they're able to meet with some of our volunteer tutors on a weekly basis, sometimes even several times a week, depending on what the desires and the needs of the students are. We put our volunteers through some rigorous training, but what we primarily see in our volunteers is, we have these conversations a lot, but at some point in time, we have to act on them. And our volunteers look at us and say, hey, I don't know everything. I'm not as academically endowed in these topics as I can be, but I am curious. I want to learn more and I want to do something. I'm an undergraduate student. Some of them have aspirations to be lawyers, political scientists. So they're aware of these type of issues, but they just might not really know the intricacies of, how it affects us collectively as a society. So we're able to utilize their services, which are, the free volunteer services, and coordinate the relationship with the Department of Corrections, both New Jersey Department of Corrections and also now our new Fort Dix Federal Correction Institution partnership that we've established. So a couple of things that were new for us, reentry education, and then also our partnership with the federal facility. And, primarily, a lot of our students are seeking GED level education. But like I said before, we do have some college level students as well. And that the influx of college level students has kind of motivated us to even shift our training a little bit the training that we provide for our volunteers to include, you know, that type of rigor when it comes to coursework. And I'll let Chris kind of chime in on some things as well.
Yeah, thank you, brother. So being on the volunteer coordinator side of things, particularly working for the Mountain View community and the transition of seeing particularly long-term, you know, system impacted people come home. I'm talking about 25, 30 years. Many of them were juveniles during the 80s when it was fancy to incarcerate Black faces, brown faces, and associating them with the crack epidemic, and therefore extending life sentences to individuals who were in Camden or Newark, New Jersey, or Patterson, the aforementioned places. So what I've come to learn growing up in those confined spaces and finding a way out of those confined spaces is that you need safe spaces, you need safe faces and credibility, right? And what we find here at the PD Green program on my end and the volunteer coordinating is that we're taking somebody who is not system impacted, right? Who is now willing to volunteer their time, their energy, and in many instances, their resources to be able to communicate with somebody who was demonized or at some point was the boogeyman of the United States, right? And we put them in contact with each other through Zoom meetings at this point. So something came great from this pandemic, right? Many things, but it allowed a human connection to be made. And restorative justice, as I understand it, is really about that. It's a circle. And a circle is representative of how we interact with each other as a species. Human beings used to sit down in circles for everything. And then a table was introduced and we sat around tables, right? But that concept is still there. That circular logic is still there in the sense of saying the way we heal each other is by having human connections. And what I'm proud to say about the PD Green program and NJ Step and Mountain View community, our brothers at Transformative Justice Initiative out in Camden, Antoine Henshaw and them, Tia Ryans with Fort House. What I'm finding, and I'm sure somebody at some point will probably catalog this and study it, is that they'll see that a movement requires the activity of human beings, right? That spiritual connection that happens where you end up saying, the way we're actually going to heal our community, restore our faith in humanity is by shaping those communications and those connections, right? And so it's by no coincidence that most of the panelists here are from the NJ Step community, right? So somebody had this idea that said, if you introduce education, higher education into a place that's supposed to be marginalized of the ultimate margins, I'm talking about the cracks between the margins, which is prisons, right? And you introduce higher education to that, and then you provide people that are leaving that place with reentry services that helps them then navigate on a campus, learn how to use a cell phone, learn how to use technology, etc. You see Transformative Justice Initiative emerge. You see Fort House emerge. You see connections like this right now being made with people who have experienced it and then take that experience and hopefully communicate these ideas to actualize change.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And, you know, I think I sent a bunch of questions earlier, and I'm sort of structuring this as we talk, you know, thinking about, you know, from the Shanti's vision of the NJISJ to the work y'all did as, I want to say, students giving back. And I'm thinking of, you know, I want to reach to Christina next, you know, because of course we have the teachers, the people that come in and do this work. I'm just wondering if you know, want to, you know, and I'm sorry, before I do that, I do want to mention for anybody looking on Facebook, just because someone asked about Tia's book. So if I could just mention that real quick, it's Your Journey Beyond the Cell, pre-release manual for people in New Jersey. And there'll be a book release at Rutgers Newark Law Building, June 11th from 1 to 3, which she'll share the flyer for that as well. So, and we'll share that information on our social networks as well. But yes, so Christina, your work with NJ Step, if you could just speak on that a little more, just NJ Step and your role in the program.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm thinking about the way that Chris just defined his conceptualization of restorative justice being this circle. And, yes, I'm a teacher, right? Before anything, I say, yes, I'm a teacher, right? Certainly, that's always how I've identified myself. And so for me, what's most important is to say that space in the circle is always a space where the learner is absolutely at the center, not me, right? Because that lived experience, and I'm inside 3 of our 4 BA facilities right now, teaching a class on inequality. And so this is in my mind right now. I am just facilitating, right, at that level, because the lived experience with all of the things that we're learning, right, that's the business, that's the thing that creates that restoration. And so I will always just be very happy to sort of create a space where I can with partners, how we can, because the work that happens is created by people who know what the work needs to look like, right? And that's what that is. That's what that work can do. So yeah, I think that's what I would say about that piece. In terms of my work, I am inside teaching always every semester. And I also essentially facilitate the BA program. So NJ Step offers, oh gosh, there's so much, right? So we've got several institutional partners. We offer an AA degree inside, and that is an associate's degree in liberal arts, which is granted by Raritan Valley Community College, one of our partner institutions. And then there is the baccalaureate degree, which is a BA in justice studies, and that's out of Rutgers University, Newark. And then we are piloting, which is so exciting, an MA certificate with Drew University, our partners as well. So inside, students have options to pursue those degrees at whatever pace they choose and at whatever pace we can offer courses. And then on the outside, there's a transitions team. And so that transitions team, oh my goodness, they do so much. There's so much going on there just to sort of support students in that reentry journey. And there's also the Mountain View communities, which everyone's been talking about. That's right. I'm trying to think if I missed. So we've got inside on campus, we've got that bridge from inside to campus, and even students who are released in the middle of it all, right? Like right now, there's a student who's enrolled in my class and he's out. And so now I'm going to finish that semester that I started inside on Zoom. And it's a joy, right? It's a joy, and I'm thrilled and happy to do it. So yeah, I think that's enough of that for now. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Christina. And actually that gives me, you mentioned the student who is currently out, which gives me a segue to the work that Tia is doing, because of course, there's that support in that system on the inside, but if, my feeling, and you can, validate this, is potentially need just as much support on the outside. And I feel like Tia, that's, one of your major roles with Forte House. So if you could just speak to that. Oh, I'm sorry. I think it might be muted.
I am muted. Thank you. So I do want to start by saying Forte House is literally a collection of all my personal experiences, right? So when I was initially released from, well, let's start back even before that. While I was incarcerated, I started taking my first higher education classes, right? My 4-year university classes. And I'm a first generation college graduate, right? So I was super excited to have that opportunity and see it through to the end. And then when I was released, I didn't have the support that is definitely needed. You're telling someone who was incarcerated as a teenager that's never driven a car, that's never had an apartment, that's never, I never had credit. I don't know those things. You're telling me to be successful, don't recidivate, contribute economically and socially. And I didn't know how to do that, right? And then, do all the statistics with the first 3 to 6 months, those without community support tend to recidivate. So you're basically telling me you want me to recidivate. So because I didn't have that community support. And then housing was a really, really big social determinant that I could not meet easily. You may take the question off of the housing applications that say, ask me if I have a prior conviction, but you're still going to ask me for rental history that I don't have. You're still going to ask me for credit history that I do not have. You're still going to ask me, because the way things are set up, I may not even have a job that can give me a pay stub that I need for you to say, okay, we'll go off your income. Like I had the waitress. It was the easiest thing that I could do. And you can't calculate cash. So you're putting me in a position where I'm still going to be starting at the finish line, right? So I said, I don't want people to experience that same thing, right? Why can't we as a whole kind of come together? During my academic journey in political science, I was taught to kind of look at things in the area of view. How do systems play on things? How do institutions contribute to things? How does things that are historical can have a different word, but they still mean the same thing as they used to, right? They still have the same impact as they used to. And for that reason, I said, you know what can I do? I am that person, and I know plenty of people who say, all right, here's the problem, let's give a solution. And it was very difficult because when you talk about restorative justice, you talk about different things. Like Fort House is a place that can offer that, but then you have people that don't believe in this, right? I'm so many minorities when I step into a room, formerly incarcerated, young, Black, female, right? And it's like everybody has a dream. What makes you special? So what I did with Fort House is I took every single penny I had in calculated money that I didn't have to purchase a 10-bedroom space, right? I wanted to give what I never had. I wanted someone to have, everyone we touched to have a safe, stable, affordable space, right? Our mission technically is predicated on the belief that higher education is one of the most significant catalysts in reducing recidivism. But we also know that, after experiencing it for one, but talking to a group of people, that housing was one of the biggest hurdles. So how do we give you that little leg up, right? We're not trying to cripple, we're not trying to do any of that. We want to make sure that you are economically self-sufficient. We want to make sure that you're not just ready for the job market, but career market. We want to make sure that you not only receive, but you're put in a position to give back tenfold, right, to communities that we belong to. And yeah, that's the gist of Fort House. It was not hard. There are going to be plenty of people who did not and still won't believe in what it can do, what restorative justice means, how it plays into making sure that we not only individually have, for lack of a better word, this come up, right? And what I mean by come up is our definition of success is success, right? But the community as a whole, the society as a whole, like everything that my co-panelists have been talking about has all been a collective journey, right? Nothing they've said is it takes one person to say, and I always say this, it takes more than one person, it takes more than one. If you look at like mass incarceration and even the lack of restorative justice efforts and the things that are set in place, if you look at those as like this war, right? This war of mass incarceration, there's always more than one way to fight a war, right? No one just says, we're going to send an army. You are going to send the Marines, you're going to send the Air Force, you're coming by sea, you're going to technology, you're coming from every which way. And that's the same way we have to. We have to tackle it through the youth, right? Shanti spoke about that. We have to tackle it from while they're inside. And Ian and Chris spoke about that, higher education while we're inside those spaces, because that opens you up to different thinking differently, thinking outside the box, wanting more for yourself, wanting more for your family, your peers, your community. And then from the outside, making sure people from the back end, making sure people don't recidivate. And the spaces like Fort House are designed for that. They're designed to not knock any of those existing programs, organizations, or systems out of the way. Fort House is designed to make sure that we help already existing programs sustain and be successful. So when you think about NJ Step and you think about the acquisition rate, right? We can get people to come, but what about the retention rate? How do we make them stay? And then again, a big thing is going to be housing, one of the biggest social determinants.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tia, for that. Appreciate it. And you've actually made me think of, I think we talked about support, the support of the group of these organizations. And one of the questions you just reminded me of that I had, I believe for you, Chris and Ian, or anybody who may want to chime in on it, I do want to ask sort of the challenges within the carceral, if there were hurdles. I think of things like, the climate, is it supportive within the institution? Are they supporting? I feel like it's probably different in different places, but, did you find, in your stories, did you find support within the institution when you were, making these, or was it a part of just, we're going to overcome despite, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. I think what I learned during my time spent was that individuals are individuals. So when I say that, I mean that, certain people have their stance, but other people won't necessarily share that stance. And coming into the facility, I had the assumption that, all these guards were the same. They all were anti-Black, racists that, didn't humanize us at all. But over the course of actually spending time there, you get to differentiate who is who and what is what. Of course, you have actual educational staff that work within these facilities that constantly push, that constantly encourage, and they become a voice that many of us hadn't had prior to going inside. A lot of us have going from the voice of you're never going to be anything to the voice of like, what are you doing? What are you waiting for? You can do this. And I think that's really integral in anyone's growth. But I think particularly in such a toxic environment when you can be easily distracted, to hear those words of reinforcement, words of affirmation, to hear that on a regular basis, I think was very integral and key to my personal development. I had to even get into NJ Step, I was approached by a tenure Rutgers professor who was just like, hey, you seem to be doing pretty good. Like, how do you feel about getting into Rutgers? And prior to him even entertaining this conversation with me, I didn't really think that it was really tangible. I knew it was possible, but he made it seem more tangible just based on how we had the conversation. So I think that inside there's a lot of variation of support versus, people that kind of turn their noses up. I had the opportunity to go inside of the facility I was incarcerated in to do the keynote speech for their graduation. And afterwards, I had some administration come up to me, say, I really appreciated your speech, blah, blah, blah. But then I had some actual officers come up to me, shake my hand, basically saying, I'm proud of you. And these are officers I didn't know when I was inside, that just respect the effort, they respect the trajectory, they respect the basically 180 that I pretty much took. So the words of encouragement are there. Sometimes they are scarce. It varies from facility to facility, but then also you kind of have to rely on the guys that you're inside with also, that that you're in class with. And there's a lot of camaraderie that comes from that. Just being inside itself, there's a lot of camaraderie that comes part of that. But specifically when it comes to pursuing something that isn't necessarily the cool thing to do, I think that's when that camaraderie multiplies even more. So the support is there. It's just a matter of how and where to find it.
Thank you. And, Chris, I don't know if you or anybody else who might want to add to that, if you felt sort of that same where you had that support, you've got the teachers and, that access, but the support from within the institution itself. If you need to speak to that.
Yeah, if I can, absolutely. So I spent a significant amount of time at Southwoods, which is in that particular prison. It's the only prison that I know of at that time anyway, that had a unit that was designated NJ STEP, right? So over like 75% of the students of the NJ STEP program were housed on that unit. And so the remaining people on the unit were aspiring NJ STEP students, right? You come onto the tier, because we moved on to the tier in mass. We come onto the tier, therefore we have disrupted the entire flow of institutionalized thinking, right? So now education enters that space. What I observed, I literally watched it with my own eyes, was individuals who were out of school, cared less about school, and were only playing chess, playing cards, and watching Jerry Springer every day, right? Started to sit closer and closer to the brothers who were sitting down analyzing a literary topic and saying, how am I going to take this essay, right? How am I going to take this piece of novel work, right? This literature, compare it with this other piece of literature, put them into conversation with each other to manifest my own thought, right? Thank you, Professor Walling. Thank you, Professor Tuxson. How am I going to do that? And the cat is sit there and say, what? And they overhear this. And then you see that transformation occur when you end up having guys who were just living on a tier playing cards, aspiring to become college students. That's restorative, right? You introduce something into a space that didn't exist prior and was taboo in many instances, and even looked like saying this. And I heard somebody say this one time when I called them over the phone. They said, you sound white, right? Why are you talking white? Because back in the day, I'd be like, yo, I'm busting it up. I'm on the block. I'm doing my thing. What's good, right? And it would be, oh, understanding. But once I said, good evening, how are you doing today? I'm thinking about you, right? And you utilize some type of just English language. It's just English. Suddenly you become speaking white, which teaches us the thought processes that go into constructing marginalization of Black and brown people. When you start speaking eloquently, suddenly you become what you were not supposed to be, right? So that's what happened in that space. And just in closing, even the correctional officers who were actually overseers started to implement correctional theory in a sense of saying, finally, my job has substance. It means something. I get to come to this unit every day in which there have been no fights, there have been no assaults on police officers, right? I get to sit down and watch guys discuss philosophy. It was transformative. Still is.
Really went from arguing about who's the best rapper to who's the best philosopher, like in real life.
That's amazing. Thank you. And I think y'all answered there was another question I had, and I appreciate, I feel like y'all have done that a few times, so I appreciate, I think I was going to ask what the type of students who've engaged in that work, because, for me, I always think of this, they always talk about like Malcolm or, people who went in and then were educated inside, and that seems to be this thing. But sometimes it's like there's students that, we always tell people there's people that are brilliant that are going in too, and that have that knowledge, and it's just brought out. It sounds like, it's just brought to the forefront under those conditions. So yeah, thank y'all both for sharing that. I want to kind of speak about, because I think even, there's that time there and time out. There's also that mental aspect and that test, you know, what you're dealing with. And I think Sister Shanti, I think NJISJ does some work, I believe, supporting, you know, basically mental stress or impacting people time served. So could you speak to that? And if anybody else has any, wants to chime in.
So at the Institute, we do have a mental health toolkit, which is used to, it was the second kind of installment in our youth justice toolkit. So first one being the Restorative Justice hubs, and the second being this mental health toolkit, because it just, if you look at who gets incarcerated, especially as young people, 70% of young people were entering in with mental health conditions, one that were either underdiagnosed or undiagnosed, right? And then they'd come into programming and they'd be diagnosed and given prescriptions, given therapy, and then sent home. And that's kind of like it, right? And so that kind of disconnect was where we decided to take a look at the actual communities, right? Why aren't young people able to get mental health care? Why are they not able to be diagnosed? Right? And then why is there not a prison to community pipeline that connects people who are exiting with the services that they need? And so what the mental health toolkit does is build on this restorative justice hub concept and asks the state to essentially fund money for front-end investment. And there's like 70% is really the magic number, right? Because around 70% of young people who exit the criminal justice system and receive mental health services do not recidivate. That's what the data tells us. So can you imagine if we afforded everyone the opportunity to receive mental health care before they became criminal justice, you know, injustice involved? If you do that, right, you can lessen the reliance on punitive measures to address young people's care. Second, you'll also change the community's mindset around the rhetoric that these are bad kids, right? It's around like, these are kids who need help, who need support. And then we also were seeing that, you know, young people who are getting some sort of services, right? We're only getting services in a bubble at school, right? I have a social worker at school who like notices something, maybe does some outreach for me, but I'm not in school year round. I'm not in school 24/7. If there's no connection to what's happening at home, it's impossible for me to maintain that care. The same way that we harp on the summer slide with education, how young people exit school during the summer and they like lose track of all the progress that they made. The same thing happens for young people who are receiving mental health care. The summer slide is applicable to that. Young people will continue to regress over the summer if there's no community pipeline situated there. And so we did asset mapping again. What mental health services are there? Hardly anyone could tell us. We went across 11 cities and we maybe received 5 concrete names of actual mental health resources that were available, that were free, and that didn't have 6 months or more waiting periods, right? Telehealth is all fine and great, but there was a digital divide that New Jersey had at the top of this pandemic that we were not accounting for. And so what that toolkit does, again, is it allocates funding. It pushes the state to allocate funding for mental health services on the front end so that everyone is able to get it. It also teaches the community how to establish their own telehealth line that can be accessed from the phone without internet, right? How do we do that, right? And so again, with the funding, with the community pipeline, with cultural competence, helping people understand the difference between mental health care, the different types of mental health care, right? Because if you don't know what your child's issue is, you might just think that they're getting adequate care at school, but they actually need a psychiatrist and not a social worker. If you don't know the difference between the type of care, you can't advocate correctly. And so that toolkit aimed to do that. And it'll build upon the restorative justice model by creating different pathways and avenues for young people to receive care. And all of this is a part of the continuum of care. Young people should receive preventive services, intervention services, diversion services, all before they are placed in a punitive setting. There are 5 levels of care that have 5 or more different options in them that young people should touch every single one of them before they enter into the justice system. And so that's the work that I do, right? Trying to get the state to understand that young people, especially those who are under 26 and don't have that, fully formed executive functioning process, the decision-making center yet, should not be penalized and with incarceration. Okay, they should be taken care of in their communities. Their families should be supported, and that we have to place this money, right, this $56 million that we're investing in the Juvenile Justice Commission, and turn that into community reinvestment funds. Close the prison, allocate the money to community-based services that will keep young people in their homes, their families supported, put food on their table, keep them housed, keep them with robust education, community programs, restorative justice programs, mental health programs, all of these things we could be investing in instead of incarceration.
Thank you so much for all of that. And thank you for even just bringing the digital divide into the conversation, because, you know, as librarians, speaking as a librarian, often on the front line and the things that people are asked to do sometimes, it's, you know, it blows my mind. So thank you for, in case I would have forgot to bring that into this, mentioning that. I do have a question for Sister Tia, just in regards to, and I've got a few good questions from our Facebook people that I want to share as well, which I'll get to. But I was going to ask Tia about just any specific, if you could speak to any hurdles that may be specific to women dealing with the system, you know, within and post incarceration. Let's see. She's there, or we'll come back to that. We can circle back to that when we get a chance. The other things I wanted to ask, I think we kind of spoke on this earlier, as Christina. You know, I was going to ask, are there, you know, I feel like this is a yes, but, you know, are there collaborative aspects to the program? You know, maybe you could just speak to one like specific change in the program that's been maybe implemented by speaking to the students, like something that wasn't thought about prior, where, you know, like, oh, wow, we might have missed that, but this is, you know, how we need to engage this forward based on that feedback.
Sure. So, I mean, the very proposal for NJ-STEP was in part drafted by folks with lived experience, and they dictated some of those policies and you know, pieces of the program that we hold absolutely as foundational. They named the program, right? so absolutely. In fact, in this moment right now, many of our staff are graduates of the program, right? And I can also say, so on campus, certainly, right? And in terms of the program, just from a structural space, certainly. But even inside, as we're moving and through this ongoing pandemic, and I'm listening to you say all the things that you as a librarian, you know, provide and support to the community. And so if you're looking for a super specific example, I can say one that we've been working on that students have been just asking for, because resources inside are so limited and the desire is so massive to have resources, right? And so we're building, my colleague, Professor Tuxton, she's building these senior thesis libraries where students can access basically any textbook that was ever taught in a class, because, you know, sometimes you take a class and you think, oh, I really need to deal with that guy. I have to think about that theory and I'll never find it again. And so we're putting those into every single facility, a few copies, and including any kind of article that a student might want to reference, we're adding them in, and it's just going to keep growing. So that's something that students needed and that we are in a space to facilitate, which is hugely important. We also engage folks inside, if they're still inside and they've graduated, and it's like, oh, you want to stay engaged, and that's your community, and that's your, you know, those are your people, right? That's that world inside. And so you want to stay part of it. And so we've done some work with alumni. Also being led by Professor Tuxton right now are those alumni tutoring groups. And so they're going through some information particular to that senior thesis, right? Some sort of training, but also like exposure to that theory, so that when people are writing these senior thesis projects, there's really specific support that is kind of like right inside with those resources. So those are some things that I can think of just in terms of what do people need. No one can tell us what they need better than people who are living it. And so absolutely, there's a primary voice there and always has been and always will be. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Christina. And I've got a couple questions from the Facebook. So the first one, I've got one for the NJ Step alum. How did this program support your healing and transformation coming back home? So I think if anyone.
Yeah, I think I feel like it's easier for me to address the transformation piece because healing is still ongoing. Like the healing is still ongoing because the trauma is a little different. Being directly impacted, being formerly incarcerated, now back into a society that kind of deems you disposable. So the trauma is kind of different now. But as far as the transformation, I think the biggest things I try to highlight is the reality that my social network has shifted. And I think that plays a big part into people and the decisions that they make generally. I think, one thing I try to focus on, and I wish I would have had somewhere like the Fort House when I was first released, because, I'm originally from Trenton, New Jersey. I wanted to do everything to stay away from home, because I felt like I would either fall victim to something or end up perpetrating, some other type of infraction that would land me back inside. So I began to take advantage of people I would meet in school and really just kind of really start to cultivate friendships that I may not have had previously because I looked at someone being so different than me. But I was able to find myself in a space that I might have been initially a little bit intimidated by, but to be accepted by the peers that were kind of cultured and trained to be in that space, and want to see them accept me as them. It just kind of started to reinforce my confidence. And, I just felt like, I belong here. And, I started contributing to conversations more frequently. So I think that's one of the most fundamental transformations that has taken place for me.
I can jump in. I think for me, it was the change of thinking. I think I always say that higher education instilled a confidence in me that I did not have previously, because I was open to different possibilities, different ways of thinking, different people. It just opened it up to a world that I didn't know. And I took that confidence and kind of ran with it. It was like, well, now you gave me the tools. Now I'm going to go build a house, right? And I kind of went there with it. But I also tell people that it helped me. When I talk about these tools, it gave me another tool in my fight, right? So again, my degree is in political science, and people ask me all the time, do you want to be a political, do you want to be in science, politics? And I'm like, no, I can't be in politics. So they're like, why did you take that? Why do you have that degree then? What's the point? And I tell them, listen, the same way the devil needs to know the Bible inside and out so he can manipulate who he needs to manipulate and what he needs to manipulate, is the same way that I need to know the same systems that I want to navigate against, right? I want to know how they think. I want to know certain institutions and how they intertwine with those systems, and how can I work with them to work against them and, work through them, not for them. So I actually focused my degree on something that I wasn't really passionate about, something that I wanted to use as a tool. And the reason I did that was because of my exposure to higher education, right? When I first had my first class while I was inside the correctional facility, I was like, wait a minute, I can think like that. The way she's teaching, I want to start thinking like that. And that's actually the reason I chose my major, because of a class that I was exposed to while I was still incarcerated at EMCF. But as far as the emotional component, as Ian pointed out, there's always going to be this ongoing transformation. There's always going to be an ongoing healing. But the only thing I could just say was it just transformed my confidence. That's all, that's like the biggest thing. And confidence I'm going to use in this broad spectrum, because you need confidence to do so many different things. Be up here, start a nonprofit, write a book, right? There's so many things you need confidence for. Walk up to random people and say hi. So I feel like that was the biggest transformation for me. But the healing, that never stops. But I do appreciate being in a space where, whether that be mentally or kind of physically in a space, but where I could see things from the outside in, right? Sometimes you, and then you're able to articulate it in a way that you probably could not before, because maybe you didn't understand it. So I appreciated that. And I can say that's basically how I feel like it's transformed me, and how I'm still going on that healing journey as well, but it's put me in a position to help other people heal. So I can say that's also a part of it. Reggie, we can't hear you.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Pretending this is my first Zoom here. I was gonna say thank you so much. And thank you, just the confidence and everything. And for the record, if you do decide to go into politics, I'm out there with a poster board. So if you do. No
Listen,
problem.
I think I'm still confusing people, because I was recently appointed as the first ever formerly incarcerated person. We're not gonna say man or woman, just person in the entire country ever to serve on an advisory role for the Department of Corrections. So it's just weird, because I actually get to go into the facility where I resided at for over a decade. And of course, the officers got their little snarky remarks, but I just sit there and look at them with a little smirk, because as it stands, I have a lot more leverage than you at this point. So we're not even gonna discuss that, and we're just gonna let you say your little smart remarks, and I'm just gonna keep on walking with the commissioner and saying hi to everybody that I haven't seen in a while.
Salute. I love that. That's beautiful. Brother Chris, anything, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So the healing process is significant, and that anybody who has spent any amount of time in the dehumanizing space that is the Department of Corrections anywhere in the United States, but specifically here in New Jersey, you have survived an adverse experience. And my major was psychology, and I've learned through that our brain has a way of wiring itself and rewiring itself. But when it is hardwired through traumatic experiences, right? Sights, sounds, smells, people, faces, philosophical approaches, beliefs, etc., can trigger you into going into a dark place that you have no control over. And so being able to connect with people who have experienced or have shared similar experiences to that which I have, it reminds me that I'm not alone, right? There are millions of us. The 750,000 people, last I have read, are released from confined spaces annually. And that's 750,000 people who have survived some type of mental trauma and need help. But many of them don't have what we have at the NJ Step Mountain View community. We haven't been able to connect with each other like we used to on campus for our annual meetings and stuff because of COVID. but we are connected in many ways. Like I haven't personally seen Tia in over 2 years now, but I see her trials, I see her successes, but I see her smile, right? And that matters to me. And so on Facebook, you have the like option, you have the heart option, etc. But even if I do not utilize that tool, I am connected to Tia, I am connected to Ian, I'm connected to so many brothers and sisters who have survived that. And in that process, I heal. The transformation essentially comes from this idea, and I'll paint a very quick picture if I can. Administrative segregation inside of prisons is solitary confinement. I spent time in solitary confinement. I know people who spend years, others who have spent decades in solitary confinement. And in that space, there is a sound, silence, and then maddening thumping and screaming and banging because someone is having an experience. They're having a breakdown. I myself was one of those people who used to slam and kick and bang on the door. And I've learned, and I have my own hypothesis with regards to this matter, is that because I didn't know how to communicate my pain. So the best way I could communicate was to bang on the door for a CO that could care two dams about me, pardon my language. And I would be banging for 20, 30 minutes. CO, CO, CO. And they would never respond. I could be dying in there, but they wouldn't respond. But what came down to this is that now I have the language to be able to communicate, and that in and of itself is transformative, because I know there is a young boy and there's a young girl right now in New Jersey who is in one of those spaces, who is possibly kicking and banging on a door, and somebody who is called a correctional officer or a social worker or other than that is in that space to be able to interpret that as pain, but they refuse to. They interpret it as a child being unruly. So I would say that my transformation is to be able to articulate to that young boy and that young girl that has yet to see this, but hopefully their parents do, or the community does, that you have to listen to a child that's screaming and banging because you listen to a toddler when they're starving, because all that has is the ability to cry. That's his way of telling you it's hurting. That's his way of telling you it needs to sleep. That's his way of telling you it is hungry. But once it starts to get love and appreciation and compassion, etc., all of the things that we are capable of, then that child grows up to then transform and be able to, in some way, communicate in the way that we're able to communicate tonight.
Just had to let that breathe for a minute. Yeah, I appreciate y'all. So yeah, thank you so much. I can't thank y'all enough. As with a lot of great programs, the time is of the essence. And I mean, y'all have given us so much just within this short space of time. So I want to thank y'all for that and just highlight. I have a quick question. We're winding down, but I feel like this is a pretty important question for Shanti, but I do want to highlight a comment. And say thank you from someone who just says it is from Facebook. It is phenomenal that Tia, Chris, and Ian excel within systems that were not designed for their success. So overcoming despite the odds, and I think that's a story that people who need that message can build from, or people who have loved ones going through it, tap into that strength. Share some of the information imparted here tonight. And I have a paper that, a list that Christina sent me, something I'll be sharing on our social networks. Thank you again for that. I'll be sharing a few things, about each organization. I do want to ask real quick, Sister Shanti, there was a question that was on earlier from Facebook, just asking, does NJISJ engage with Newark Public Schools currently to implement restorative and transformative justice programs for students and staff? And if so, or maybe it'd be something preventative.
Right. No, is the short answer. The reason why is because the restorative justice funding is going to the Youth Services Commission. So like Essex County has a Youth Services Commission, and anyone who's interested in learning more about how to apply for the funding for implementing restorative justice programs is encouraged to contact the Essex County Youth Services Commission. They meet pretty regularly, and they are supposed to be in the middle of having community programming around just explaining how all of this works. However, in the regulations for the program, it is required of anyone who's receiving this funding to work with educators, educational institutions to build pipelines for young people into the restorative justice space in lieu of suspensions, expulsions, right? It's even, you know, and it's also up to the district as well. You guys can also advocate for additional funding to really understand how you integrate restorative justice practices into teacher pedagogy, right? How do you train teachers to teach from a restorative and transformative place? And that's a whole nother, you know, that's a whole nother ballpark right there. But long story short, restorative justice programming is coming to Newark. Newark Public Schools are aware of this, and it is up to whoever wants to, take the mantle for Newark to build those pipelines with MPS, but it's definitely coming.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, thank you all. So I'm gonna have to do a bit of a closing here, but I do want to ask if there's any, I think one of the things I was going to ask for final questions are, how can people support these programs? I think we can share these, share the networks. I don't know if there's anything that maybe feels essential that I might have missed, that we might want to address, or any just final statement, shout outs, before I do my closing spiel. And if not, at least, I just want to thank y'all again for the 100th time.
Well, Reggie, I know when I was having some technical difficulties, Ian messaged me and said I missed the question. So if you'd like to ask.
Oh, right.
You know what? And that was a crucial question, actually. Yes. So thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sister T. So I did want to ask just about the experience, and we're gonna make time. Hurdles that may be specific to women dealing with incarceration or post-incarceration.
Excuse me. So specific to women, I think when it comes to women in post-incarceration, I feel like there's a level of women being objectified that I think is overlooked. So you hear about things inside the correctional facilities, specifically MCF, and like the physical and sexual abuse, but it doesn't stop when you leave there. Like when you go to halfway houses or halfway back, you've automatically regressed to either your incarceration state or your pre-incarceration state. And they talk about women, like 80% of women that are incarcerated report sexual abuse prior to their incarceration, right? So if you compound that with during incarceration, right? And then you come out and you're like, yes, I can finally kind of exhale and try to get my life back in order. You regress back because a lot of the men in those spaces, I'm not going to say a lot, but some men in those spaces put you in positions where it's like, well, if you don't do this, then I'm going to say you tried to abscond, or you tried to escape, or you tried to deviate. And then, so I'm not sure how many men experience that, but I don't think it's like women are going to experience that a lot more. And I've heard way too many stories to believe otherwise. I've witnessed things personally to believe otherwise. So I think right there already, you're starting at a place where you're being pushed into a regression of, the trauma that took place when you're a 5-year-old little girl, right? But then you're expected by society to not be that person. You're expected to be an adult, whatever that means, to be an adult, and forget everything you've been through, forget everything the system designed to put against you. You must survive, right? And you must not only survive, you must thrive. You must be economically self-sufficient. You must not take on any criminogenic behavior. You must not only do that, but then you must make sure that everyone in your lineage is phenomenal behind you, right? Don't pass on any of those traumas. So I feel like that burden in itself is a huge task, but then I also feel like there are many spaces, and I'm going to even say that Poorhouse is guilty of this. There are many spaces that are designed to cater to the majority of the population, and the majority of the population is men. And the reason I say that is because Fort House was designed 4 levels, 2 for women and 2 for men, because I want to help everybody, right? This is what I want to do. And then we had a waiting list of men keeping these 2 floors open for women, and we didn't have enough women applicants. We had 1 woman on the top floor, and I was like, okay, well, let's make 3 floors men and then 1 for, women. And then we had a woman leave, and we didn't have a waiting list for the women, but we had a waiting list for the men. And I was like, you know what? Let's just make the entire space for men. And it hurt my heart, but I was like, I could have, as an organization, kind of pushed and reached out to seek those women out, right? Maybe you might be in a space where you feel like you got to carry so much on your own that if someone just said, hey, and looked for them, I could have been in a position to help them. But now the good news is that drove me and kind of put a little battery in my back to now open a second space that caters specifically just for women. But I mean, how many organizations cater to the majority? I don't care. I don't know if it's money-wise. I don't know if it's just geography. I don't know what it is. Maybe fulfilling a grant. So I got to get these beds in here filled, and men are the easiest ones. I don't know. But I feel like that's a big hurdle when it comes to women as well.
All right, thank you. Yes, thank you for sharing that, enlightening us. Yeah, my 100th thank you. And, we'll absolutely share the organization's information on our social networks. In the library, we'll have the paper that Christina blessed us with, which will have all, believe these organizations and others, quite a few other resources in English and Spanish. So we'll get that out for anybody who may need to send someone by. So I do want to
just jump in on one thing. During these times of uncertainty, I wish everyone much continued success and health for you and your families. And we just so appreciate you coming on and speaking your truth to us. And we hope that we can partner with you in your journeys. Thank you ever so. Go ahead, Reggie.
Absolutely, Mayor, and what Dale said, I hope, I still have a paper full of questions here. There's still so much to cover. So I look forward to if we can do this again in another, in another program. And I do want to spotlight a program we have coming up on Tuesday, May 10th, 2022 at 6 p.m. So I should have did 2 papers here, but I'll hold this up. So it's, join us for a conversation with Judge Victoria Pratt, renowned national and international advocate for reforming the criminal justice system or injustice system. Her new book, The Power of Dignity, describes her experiences as chief judge in the Newark Municipal Court, where Pratt's unconventional reforms converted her courtroom into a place for problem solving and a resource for healing. So that's Tuesday, May 10th. I'm gonna hold this up. I don't know if my light is glaring on it, but you can also go to npl.org. So Newark Public Library.org, which will have information how to register for that and other upcoming programs we have. I also want to thank my colleague Dale Colston, Austin Williams, and Alicia Grant. I want to thank Christina Strasburger, my AFAM fam at Rutgers Newark, for introducing me to Christina, who in turn introduced me to these amazing people here. Thank y'all so much for joining us to discuss this important topic. Thank you everybody who tuned in, and wish y'all all the best in your ongoing journeys.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good
Peace.
evening, everybody.
Peace. Y'all too. Take care.